you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. College football playoff rankings. We talked about it on Monday's show. I know everybody knows the drill by now, but this is the time of year where that playoff committee gets together every week in Grapevine, Texas. And every Tuesday from now until the end of the season, they put out their top four as things stand right now. Last top four is obviously the four teams that will make the college football playoff. And so I do want to go ahead and react a little bit to the top four that was dropped on Tuesday night. And I'll say a couple things. One, first off, this is the poll of record, okay? AP poll doesn't matter. Coaches poll doesn't matter. This is the poll that matters. But I'll also say, like, I'm not going to react and overreact and yell and scream about this. There's 4, 5, 6 more of these coming. And in my head, I think you should be ranking teams based on who they are right now, where they could be, not where you expect them to be at the end or where you had them in the preseason. So let's get into it. My personal thought was that probably Georgia would be number 1. I did think Ohio State would be number 2 just based on the resume. Florida State 3, Michigan 4, Washington 5, and Oregon 6. Sort of got it correct because here is the official committee decision. I gave you what I thought it was going to be. Here is what it ended up being. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Georgia. Number 3, Michigan. Number 4, Florida State. Number 5, Washington. Number 6, Oregon. Number 7, Texas. That one's interesting. We'll get to that one in a minute. Number 8, Alabama. Number 9, Oklahoma. Number 10, Ole Miss. You want to go beyond that, Penn State at number 11. So I want to dive in. Like I said, we're not going to overreact. I'm not going to yell and scream. I'm not going to go crazy. And let me start with Ohio State at number 1. I don't think most people that have watched college football this year would argue that Ohio State is probably the best team in the country. But I think the committee did the right thing here by putting them at number 1. You look at those 2 very good wins, those 2 very quality wins at Notre Dame, which is 15 in the first poll, Penn State at home, and they should be rewarded. 2 top 15 wins, 1 on the road. They deserve to be number 1 based on what they've done on the field. Now, obviously, their toughest game in theory is ahead at Michigan, and we'll see if they can, survive up until that point. And obviously, if they were to lose to Michigan, then I do think there is a scenario where they're really having to scrape and claw to get into that 14 playoff, simply because there's going to be probably a worthy Big 12 champ, probably a worthy Pac-12 champ, as well as the SEC. And in that case, Michigan would probably be your Big 10 representative as well. So Ohio State, I have no problem with them being number 1. I haven't seen them as the best team, but I believe that based on merit, they probably should be number 1. Second thing that I found interesting, and again, I'm not going to yell and scream and get super mad and all that stuff, but Texas at number 7, followed by Bama at 8, Oklahoma at 9 is very interesting to me. Now, from the Texas perspective, I don't really have any real problem with it. That win at Alabama every single week gets better. You can argue that might be the best win anybody has in college football at this particular moment in time. But at the same time, I do find it interesting. Texas at number 7, very clearly rewarded for winning at Bama as they should be. What's interesting about that, though, who's at number 9? The Oklahoma Sooners, who beat the Texas Longhorns. So basically, Texas is getting credit for the head-to-head win. Oklahoma is not. Now, the committee would tell you that Oklahoma just lost. They lost to a Kansas team that's on the fringes of the top 25, although Kansas was ranked. And you can make the argument that Texas is playing better than Oklahoma right now. I don't know that I believe that's I guess I would say Texas is probably playing better because they're not coming off a loss. But at the same time, they do have a backup quarterback. And at the same time, it's kind of the weird spot where it's the only real one where Oklahoma is basically the only school that's being punished despite a head-to-head win. Washington ahead of Oregon. Washington has the head-to-head win, even though most of us think that Oregon's playing better football right now. Texas ahead of Alabama. Oklahoma behind Texas. That one is interesting to me. Just mentioned, I thought another interesting takeaway, not surprising. Washington over Oregon in the 5-6 spot. Washington comes in at number 5, Oregon at number 6. That's not really a surprise. Both these teams have played very well. Washington has the head-to-head win, but it is worth noting of late, Washington has really struggled. Last 2 games, they easily could have lost. Easily could have lost to Arizona State 2 weeks ago. Easily could have lost to Stanford last week. And they got a tough one this weekend at USC. Do think it is interesting that overall 6 Pac-12 teams are currently in the top 25. Washington at 5, Oregon at 6. We have Oregon State at 16, UCLA or Utah at 18, UCLA at 19. So that is 2, 4, 5. And then, so I guess it's only 5. But the point, and USC is in there somewhere too. USC is in at 20. So Washington, Oregon, Oregon State, Utah, UCLA, Southern Cal. Okay. So it is worth noting there are a lot of really good teams, but it's also worth noting that a lot of those teams are going to play each other. Oregon's going to play Oregon State. UCLA has, I think Oregon State has somebody else. I can't remember all of it now, but the point is all those teams are going to pick up more losses. I'll be curious because this is the knock on the Pac-12. Generally don't have a lot of great wins in conference and out of conference. Right now, all those teams are ranked really high. All of those teams are worthy. We will see if that plays out that way. My only other real thought finally beyond this, I do think Florida State at number 4 is very interesting. We talked about to lead the segment, Ohio State being number 1 based on merit. I believe Ohio State deserves to be there. But Florida State, in my opinion, they got a pretty solid resume. They beat LSU number 15 on a number 14, on a neutral field. And then you look at them beyond that, and they don't have any other wins over teams currently ranked, but it's not as though they have not played good football. It's not as though they haven't played good teams. Clemson's a good team. Duke obviously is on a 2-game losing streak now, thanks to Florida State, but they were a ranked team when they played. And I'll be curious how the committee handles them going forward. The thing that kind of stands out to me, them being at number 4 with Washington and Oregon right behind them. This is kind of what I see the committee. I kind of see the wheels moving in the committee's head. Okay. We've talked all year. What if we have 5 undefeated or 1-loss conference champions? Now, pretty much every team, the Big 12, everybody has at least a loss. You kind of get the idea. What I do think is noteworthy on this is it does look like Florida State could end the year with just a single ranked win. Their toughest games left are against Miami and against Florida on the road. Neither of those teams will be ranked by the end of the year. And so I only bring it up because when I look at Florida State being at number 4, already behind Michigan, what that says to me is this, is that if we do end up with a scenario with 5, 0, or 1-loss conference champs, so say Georgia in the SEC, Michigan or Ohio State in the Big 10, Texas, Oklahoma in the Big 12, and of course, whoever in the Pac-12, Oregon or Washington, I do think Florida State could be the team that's left out. Now, Florida State wins out. If they go undefeated, they're not being left out as an undefeated conference champion. But you can see the wheels already starting to turn for a scenario in which if Florida State loses a game, they could be on the brink. I like Florida State. I think they're really good. But if I was Mike Norvell, I would make sure to keep winning because that's what stood out to me. Them already being behind Michigan. Now, look, they're not going to be behind the loser of Michigan, Ohio State if they win out. Or if they have 1 loss or 1-loss ACC champ. But if we get a 1-loss Texas, a 1-loss Bama, a 1-loss Ohio State, 1-loss whatever, and Florida State has 1 loss, I could see them being left behind. All right, I think that's it for this segment. Like I said, just some quick reaction. Don't want to overdo it. Don't want to oversell it. Don't want to pretend like it's something more than it is. Because we're going to have 4 or 5 more of these to react to, and we certainly will as time goes on. But the bottom line is first college football playoff committee rankings are released. And that's Torres' take.